Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Monday, January 19th, 2026.
Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Exactly. And, when you think of this day, your mind usually goes to a very specific place.
Oh, yeah. Black and white photos, marches.
The I Have a Dream speech, for sure. You hear those clips on the news, see a few posts about civil rights. It's a whole rhythm.
A vital rhythm, of course. But the source material we're looking at today, it's asking us to pivot.
Yeah.
To look somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, we're literally turning the map away from, say, the Lincoln Memorial, and we're zooming way in. We're going to a pretty swampy riverbank in Jupiter, Florida.
Never been park. It's on the Loxahatchee River.
And I'm looking at the photos here in the file, and honestly, if you didn't know the story, it just looks like a beautiful Florida park.
Totally. Cypress trees, Spanish moss, that kind of tea-colored water.
But the gathering that's happening there today is, well, it's something else.
It really is. It's a commemoration of the Battle of the Loxahatchee. That was January 24, 1838. But this is not your typical historical reenactment.
No guys in wool uniforms firing blanks.
Not at all. The guest list for this ceremony is what really jumped out at me in the research.
It's incredible. It reads like a setup for a riddle or something. You've got a Powhatan elder,
A traditional Seminole cultural presenter.
someone performing a West African libation ceremonial, and then, to top it all off, a Muslim prayer leader.
On the surface, it seems, I don't know, disjointed, like they just invited anyone and everyone.
Right, like an interfaith panel that got lost.
But the sources are so clear on this, it is not random at all. This exact mix of traditions, it's actually a historical reconstruction. They're recreating a survival strategy from that very spot almost 200 years ago.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack how these Black and Indigenous communities in the 19th century, how they didn't just fight together,
Which they absolutely did.
but how they healed together. We're digging into what the researchers are calling insurgent geographies and the soul wound.
And the main takeaway here really is that this alliance wasn't just military. It wasn't just, guns and tactics. It was spiritual. It was a fusion. They essentially welded these different beliefs together into a kind of spiritual armor.
Okay, so let's ground this in the history first, because I think for a lot of us, there's this vague idea that, sometimes escaped enslaved people would run off and join Native American tribes.
Right.
But this paints a picture of something much more organized and, frankly, a lot more formidable.
Oh, it was a geopolitical threat. The U.S. government wasn't just annoyed by this. They were terrified. And to really get the Loxahatchee battle in 1838, you have to rewind. You have to go back to 1816 and look at something called Negro Fort.
The name itself is just so stark, it just leaps off the page.
It was a literal name on military maps. Prospect Bluff, Florida. And you have to understand, we're not talking about a couple of huts in the woods.
Right.
This was a fully militarized fort. The British had built it and then left it behind after the War of 1812. And the population numbers in the sources for that time, they're just staggering. Roughly 900 native warriors and 450 armed black fighters.
Wait, hang on. Let's just pause on that. That's over 1,000 people living free outside the U.S. slave system.
Then armed,
Yeah.
with cannons, with artillery, running their own affairs.
Wow.
It was the single largest community of free black people in North America. And for the plantation owners in Georgia, in the Carolinas, this was an existential nightmare.
Of course, if word gets out that there's a fortress of free, armed black people just south of the border.
The whole system is at risk. It's a beacon. And it was a beacon that, in their eyes, had to be put out.
So the U.S. Navy attacks in July 1816, and the details, they're just horrific.
They are. The Navy couldn't really storm the walls, so they fired what's called a heated shot.
They did what?
They literally put a cannonball in a furnace until it was red hot and then just fired it at the fort.
Oh, my God.
And it hit the powder magazine. The room with all the gunpowder, the explosion. It was basically the 19th century equivalent of a tactical airstrike.
Yeah.
The sources say nearly 300 people died
So
instantly.
wiped off the map in a second. Men, women, children.
But here's the pivot. This is the crucial part of the story. The survivors, they don't surrender. They don't go back.
They keep going.
They flee south, deeper into Florida. And that's where they meet the Seminole people, who are also being pushed south by colonial expansion. This is where that alliance really hardens.
Now, the text uses this very specific, kind of old-fashioned phrase for their relationship. It says vassals and allies. I want to unpack that because I think it could be misinterpreted.
Yeah, you could think it means the Seminoles just owned the black refugees, or the other way, that it was all one big perfectly integrated family.
Right.
And it was much more nuanced and honestly more interesting. Think of it like a federation. The Black Seminoles, they're often called Maroons, they had their own separate towns.
With their own leaders.
Their own leaders, their own crops. They were vassals in that they paid a tribute, some corn or livestock, to the Seminole chiefs for protection. But politically, they were autonomous.
But militarily, they were one unit.
Inseparable. We actually have letters from U.S. General Jessup, and he's basically complaining to Washington about it. He writes that this is a Negro war just as much as an Indian war.
And the Army tried to break them apart.
They tried to weaponize racism. They offered the Seminoles huge bribes, cash, goods, land guarantees if they would just turn over the Black refugees.
Which would have been the easy out for the Seminoles. Give them up. Save your own skin. It's the classic prisoner's dilemma.
But they didn't do it. The bond was too strong. And the sources suggest the glue holding them together wasn't just a common enemy. It was cultural.
A real exchange.
A deep cultural exchange. For instance, the Black Seminoles adopted something called the Black drink.
I saw that. It sounds pretty ominous, but it's basically a very strong tea, right?
Yeah. A super caffeinated tea. It's made from Yepon holly leaves, which is actually the only native plant in North America with caffeine. For the Seminoles, it was a ritual purifier.
Yeah.
You drink it before a big council meeting or a battle.
To clear your head.
And to purge your body. I mean, sometimes it literally makes you vomit. The idea is to sharpen the mind.
So you have these African descendants. Maybe they're holding on to Christian hymns or Islamic traditions from back home, but they're using a Native American ritual to sanctify their community.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of what scholars call creolization or fusion. They weren't giving up who they were. They were adding Seminole tools to their toolkit. They were building a culture that could survive the swamp.
Which brings us to the second big theme here. This idea of spiritual diversity as an actual survival strategy. The sources talk about marronage, this process of forming runaway communities.
Yeah.
And the argument is that these communities were basically like open source spiritual workshops.
That is a great way to put it. A spiritual Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
If you're living in a swamp, being hunted by the most powerful army around, you don't have the luxury of religious purity. You need stuff that works.
And we see this all over the Americas, not just Florida. The file brings up Jamaica, the Kumfu religion.
Right. The Jamaican Maroons, led by the legendary Queen Nanny, she practiced Obeah, which is a spiritual system from West Africa. But the Kumfu religion blended that with anything else that helped bind the community. Nanny wasn't just a general. She was a spiritual technician.
Using rituals to organize, to build courage.
To give her fighters the belief that they were literally bulletproof.
Wait, literally?
In their minds, yes. And in war, morale is everything. If you believe the spirits have shielded you, that you can catch bullets in your hand, you fight with a kind of ferocity that just terrifies a regular soldier.
Then there's Palmares in Brazil. I was just floored by the scale of this place. 11,000 people.
11,000 people. In the 1600s, it was basically a black city-state in the Brazilian jungle that lasted for almost a century. Because a lot of the people there came from Congo or Angola, they'd already been exposed to Catholicism.
So in Palmares, you had, what, churches?
You had chapels,
Yeah.
statues of saints. But those saints were being honored right alongside African gods.
The historian Stuart Schwartz calls it a creative synthesis. It wasn't confusion, it was deliberate adaptation.
Exactly. They might pray to St. George, the dragon slayer, but in their minds, they're associating him with Ogun, the Yoruba god of iron and war. They're layering the powers. It's a strategy of abundance. If one doesn't work, maybe the other will.
The sources also talk about insurgent geographies in Cuba, the idea of these secret Sunday markets.
Yes, this is so fascinating. People from different plantations who maybe even spoke different African languages would meet in these hidden spots. It wasn't just to trade chickens. It was to trade rituals, to dance. That physical space, that temporary geography became a place where they could remember who they were.
And the sources really emphasize that we can't forget Islam in this mix, which I feel is often erased from the narrative of American slavery.
Massively erased. A significant percentage of enslaved Africans were Muslim. And Islam provided this rigorous ethical framework. Prayer 5 times a day, cleanliness, no alcohol. In the absolute chaos and degradation of slavery, that discipline was a form of mental armor.
A way to hold on to your dignity.
Precisely.
So let's bring it all back to the Loxahatchee River today, in 2026. This ceremony, it's not just a feel-good moment. They are intentionally recreating this soup of traditions.
Yes. They're trying to access the how-to of healing. The organizers are arguing that you can't heal a wound this deep with just one tradition. You need the whole toolkit.
So let's walk through the specific rituals because the symbolism is so powerful. First, the African libation. I've seen this done, pouring water or gin on the ground. But what's the mechanic? What's it supposed to do?
In the Yoruba worldview, the goal is tutu. It means coolness.
Coolness.
Yeah. Heat is chaos, anger, war. Coolness is harmony, peace. When you pour the water, you are literally and spiritually cooling the earth. You're opening a channel to the ancestors, saying, we're here, we're calm, we're ready to listen.
And the text connects us to the Port Markers Project, honoring those lost in the Middle Passage.
Right. I mean, think about it. The millions who died at sea, they never had a funeral, no rites. They were just gone.
Yeah.
The libation is a way of retroactively saying, you are not lost, you are ancestors. It brings them back into the community.
Okay, then the ceremony shifts. It goes to a Native American practice, specifically the Haudenosaunee condolence ceremony. This one is amazing to me because it's so physical.
Yeah.
The metaphors are about the body.
They're incredibly visceral. It comes from the story of Anwata, who you might know as Hiawatha, and it recognizes that deep grief physically disables you.
How so?
The ritual involves things like wiping the dust of death from the ears so you can hear again, clearing the throat so you can speak without being choked by grief, clearing the eyes so you don't see the world through a constant blur of tears.
I love that. It's so practical. You can't have a conversation about healing if you literally can't speak because your throat is closed up. You have to fix the body first.
Exactly. Grief is a physical blockage. You have to remove it before you can do the work of living.
And finally, the Islamic prayer. They use the Al-Fatiha, which is the opening of the Quran, but also a very specific prayer, Salat al-Ghaib.
The prayer for the absent, this is key. Normally, in Islamic law, the body has to be present for the funeral prayer.
Right.
But Salat al-Ghaib is the exception. It's for when someone dies far away or their body is lost. At sea, in a battle, a disaster.
Which is chillingly perfect for this context.
It's the exact spiritual tool you would need. You have ancestors who died in the Florida swamps. Their bodies never recovered. You have ancestors at the bottom of the Atlantic. This prayer lets the community perform that final duty to give them that dignity across time and space.
So when you layer all these together, the cooling water to calm the earth, the clearing of the senses so the living can function, the prayer for the missing dead, it's like a comprehensive psychological intervention.
And that's where the modern psychology comes in. The sources talk about the soul wound or historical trauma. Standard Western therapy is so individual.
Right. Tell me about your problems.
Exactly. But for these communities, the trauma is collective. It's in the culture. It gets passed down. You can't just therapy your way out of the aftermath of a genocide by yourself.
You need a collective ritual for a collective wound.
That's it. By doing these ceremonies together, they validate the grief. They turn that memory of violence into a source of strength, not just pain or a desire for revenge.
That part about vengeance is interesting. The sources mention reconciliation theology, and they have this warning about premature forgiveness.
This is such a critical point, especially on MLK Day. Society wants to rush to the I have a dream part, the resolution.
The happy ending.
But this theology says, not so fast. You have to witness the wound first. You have to acknowledge the horror. If you jump straight to forgiveness without telling the truth, it's hollow. It's a form of gaslighting. The Loxahatchee ceremony creates a space where the grief can just be before anyone even talks about moving on.
It makes me think of how MLK himself is often sanitized. The text quotes his book, Why We Can't Wait. He wasn't just talking about lunch counters.
No, he was looking at the very foundation of the country. He wrote explicitly that the nation was born in genocide against indigenous people. He saw the connection. He understood that the violence against Black bodies and the violence against native land, it was the same root violence.
And we saw that solidarity flare up again so powerfully just a few years ago. Standing Rock, 2016.
That was a modern Loxahatchee moment for sure. You had Black Lives Matter activists flying to North Dakota to stand with the Sioux water protectors. Their slogan was, there is no Black liberation without indigenous sovereignty. They saw it was the same fight.
The spirit of the Black Seminoles, right there in the 21st century. There's also a more delicious example of this fusion in the file. The Muskogos.
The Muskogos.
Yeah.
I love this part of the story. These are the descendants of the Black Seminoles who just kept going. They didn't stop in Florida. They crossed the Rio Grande into Mexico. And there's a community of them in Coahuila right now.
And their culture is like this incredible time capsule.
It is. They celebrate Juneteenth, which is a very African-American holiday. But their food, it's this amazing fusion of Soul food, Mexican cuisine, and native ingredients. So you have cornbread, but it's made with local Mexican techniques. It's
Yeah.
insurgent geography on a dinner plate.
Wow. It proves the alliance wasn't just temporary, it became a whole new identity.
Exactly.
So we've covered a ton of ground here. A cannon blast in 1816 to a prayer circle in 2026. Florida swamps to Mexican plateaus. What's the big takeaway? Why does this matter to someone not at Riverbend Park today?
I think. I think it really redefines what we mean by solidarity. We live in such a polarized time, and we're often told that to be allies, we have to be the same, agree on everything, erase our differences to find common ground.
But the Black Seminoles didn't do that.
They did the exact opposite. They leaned into their differences.
Yeah.
The African person practiced obeah, the Seminole person drank the black drink. They didn't try to merge into one big generic thing. They stood side by side, fully African and fully indigenous, and found strength in that.
It's that strategy of abundance again. If my prayers aren't working today, maybe I can borrow yours.
Right. And the glue wasn't just politics. It was shared sorrow.
Sure.
They were willing to mourn together. And that's a very intimate thing, to let someone else see your grief and to help carry theirs. That builds a bond that's stronger than any manifesto.
The sources leave us with this really haunting image of the rivers, that the rivers of this country run red with blood, but they also run clear with tears.
It's a reminder that the land remembers. The Loxahatchee River is a witness, and the ceremony today is about acknowledging that witness. It's about saying, we remember what happened here, and we are still standing.
So here's the thought to take with you from this deep dive. We spend so much energy trying to find people who agree with us. We curate our bubbles. But maybe we're looking for the wrong thing.
The history of the Black Seminoles suggests that the strongest alliances, they aren't formed by people who agree on everything. They're formed by people who are willing to mourn together.
Maybe real solidarity is less about sharing an opinion and more about sharing a burden. Something to think about this MLK Day. And hey, before you go, maybe take 5 minutes. Look up the history of the land you're standing on right now. You might be surprised who and what is buried right under your feet. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
We'll see you next time.